what's up? This is Gary from Raz Rentals, and today I'm very excited to talk about NECA's brand new armored Last Ronin action figure. You know, I'm not usually one to go with the crowd, and in most cases, I almost feel like I have to dislike things that are overhyped. But in my opinion, the Last Ronin deserves all the hype it gets. I just actually reread the whole story before making this review to get as much detail as I possibly could for the accessories and, you know, whatever is included here. And I think I enjoyed the story even more the second time around. Like, you didn't have those huge gaps between issues, which were super annoying. And it just flowed so nicely from start to finish. So, let's get on with the review. As usual, NECA has done a fantastic job with their packaging, and just to give credit where credit is due, NECA credits Travis Hasback for packaging. The front here is a wonderful piece of art by Ben Bishop. Ben was one of the artists on the actual Last Ronin issues. He did the flashbacks, which showed the deaths of the turtles, as well as the afterlife scenes. By the way, this review is going to have a bunch of spoilers, so if you haven't read The Last Ronin, you might want to hit pause, go read the comic, and then come back. You know, as I reread the issues, I was amazed at how, despite having 3 different art teams, the story felt very cohesive and well-paced, right? You had Esau and Isaac Escorza on the, I guess, present-day but futuristic scenes. You had Ben Bishop on the past scenes, plus the, like I said, the afterlife scenes. And then you had Kevin Eastman on the flashbacks that were told, like, with a point of view. Like, you know, this is Michelangelo's past as he's telling it to April, or April has one too where she's explaining to Mikey what happened to her. And I think that's because Kevin Eastman did all the layouts, you know, like, the whole story is planned out by Eastman, even though he didn't provide the final pencils for most of the comic. And it goes without saying that I should also say that the colors on this were done by Luis Antonio Delgado, who provided all of the colors for the actual Last Ronin comic books too. So that's cool. It's like NECA is hiring these guys from the comics to actually work on this packaging. On the side here, you have another great new piece of art by Ben Bishop and I'm just going to say Luis Delgado. You know, this looks great. What I think is cool about this is he's actually wearing these goggles. And in the actual Last Ronin comic book, he never wears these goggles while he's fully armored. You know, it's kind of strange, but it's true. And on this side over here, you have a cropped shot of the cover of The Last Ronin #1, which is nice. You know, as I said before, the pencils and inks on this art were done by Esau and Isaac Escorza. And, you know, I try to, like, read an interview with these guys to see, like, who did what. And it kind of sounded like Esau does the pencils, and then Isaac does the inks, but then sometimes Esau will also mess with the inks, and sometimes Isaac will mess with the pencils. So it's kind of like these guys are working together, almost like Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird did together back in the day, I guess. And this was actually laid out by Kevin Eastman. So there you go. By the way, you know, this review is going to be, I'm trying to pack it with as much random tidbits that I can about this story. Did you ever see Andy Kuhn's version of the cover? You know, it looks okay, but I don't know. The final product, I think, came out a lot nicer. I think that guy actually has done some nice work on some of the IDW series comics. But I think that these brothers, the Escorza brothers, have sort of elevated it. I was kind of wondering, do you think that dude dropped out, or do you think he was asked to leave? Let me know in the comments. On the back here, you have some nice shots of the toy, some nice and moody shots. A lot of nice dark shadows, trying to make Mikey look like a ninja hiding in the shadows. There's even a nice little description here down at the bottom about The Last Ronin. And then if you come back to the front, you know, you open up the front there, and there you can see a nice shot a full-bodied shot of your action figure right here, as well as the action figure. This is like if you're a mint on card collector, you can look at this and be like, so this is what my toy would look like if he wasn't in this plastic bubble. Like, oh, that's fantastic. Speaking of the bubble, well, the window to be precise, the window is nice and big, so you can see Mikey really well. Like, you can see his whole body, and you can see all the accessories included in here. And there are a lot of accessories. And of course, I'm going to go over all of them and, give some context to where they fit in the comic book. My guy is a little off-center. I mean, look at him here. He's like sticking out of the bubble. That's weird. Down at the bottom here, just to credit some more people before I open this guy up. It says director Randy Falk, Trevor Zametz, sculpt and fabrication by Paul Harding, paint Jeff Trapp, Mike Puzo, prototypes Roger Fernandez, photography Stephen Mazurik, illustrations Ben Bishop and Luis Antonio Delgado, packaging Travis Hasback. All right, all fine people bringing us a fine-looking action figure. So as I said before, I'm going to open this up, move everything around, and hopefully nothing is broken. Hopefully everything is nice and put together well, because I don't want to have to contact Big Bad Toy Store and tell them that I need another one. They don't want to deal with that either. So I will talk to you in a second. So here he is, free from his prison of cardboard and plastic, and ready to enact his revenge on Oroku Hiroto. I have a hard time saying that. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think this guy is amazing. He is one of the coolest looking action figures that I've gotten all year. The texture on the sculpt is fantastic. I just think he's got a cool look, and I think he just perfectly captures the likeness that Esau and Isaac gave the Last Ronin. This is pretty amazing, and I'm going to show you a closer look at the sculpt and details in a second. But I just had to point that out there. He comes with tons of accessories, a lot of really cool things. Although there are some slight problems that I will get into when I get into accessories. But before we talk about the action figure, I should talk about the Last Ronin just a little bit, all right? So I'm not going to do like a complete recap of the series, like I do with my Fred Wolf action figure reviews, for two reasons, all right? One, the story is brand new, and you probably read it recently, so you already know what's going on here. And two, if you haven't read it, you should go read it, Don't let me spoil all the nice little details for you. But like I said, I am going to include a few things to talk about. I'm a huge fan of the story because I think it finally gave Michelangelo his comic book due. Like, Mikey may be like a cool dude in the cartoon and the movies. He was always my favorite, but in the comic books, like Mirage and even IDW now, with him being like a podcaster, like he sort of becomes the Mega Man X of the Turtles. Like, he doesn't want to fight. He becomes almost like a pacifist, and I think sometimes that is okay. But I also kind of picture Mikey as like, I don't know, kind of like the Spider-Man of the Ninja Turtles. Like, he's supposed to be smiling and quipping and beating up the bad guys as he's laughing at them. It just always seemed like a lot more attention was always paid to Leonardo and Raphael, and even trying to come up with all the comic books for this shot. Like so many of the Mirage and Image Comics and IDW, focus on Leonardo and Raphael on the cover. I think even Donatello gets more cover shots than Michelangelo does. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think there are good Michelangelo stories. And, I even kind of like where Peter Laird was going with Michelangelo in Volume 4, with him having that, like, affair or whatever with the alien Seri, who turned out to be, like, a princess or something of some alien race that's not Triceratons, it's the other dinosaur with the smooth plate on the back of the head. That was all cool, but, obviously that story went nowhere because Peter Laird will never finish Volume 4. Like I said, though, Leo and Raph always get the most attention, and Donatello and Michelangelo are kind of stuck doing, I don't know, subplots. So for me, I was just really happy to finally find, like, a comic book that was, like, a great story overall featuring Michelangelo. When this story was announced, like, I would have put money down on Eastman picking Raph as the Last Ronin, because That's who I thought was Kevin Eastman's favorite Ninja Turtle, like, of all time, Raphael. But I would have lost. But it would have been a happy loss, because I would have been smiling as I handed my money away, knowing that Eastman decided to finally give Mikey the comic book story he always deserved. So as I said, if you haven't read this, I highly recommend it. The whole creative team is firing on all cylinders, and, it's all built off of Kevin Eastman's layouts. In my opinion, Eastman is the master of telling a story with dynamic, fast-paced action, all right? And he also knows how to slow things down and show panels that carry emotional weight. As I reread this story, like, I never felt bored or like things were going off the rails. Like, when I think of Kevin Eastman, the one Ninja Turtle miniseries that always pops in my mind is Body Count, which he worked on with Simon Bisley. I think the series had fantastic artwork. I'm a huge Bisley fan ever since I read the Batman Judge Dredd crossover. And, I thought it had a lot of high-paced action, but it always lacked something for me, I could never recommend it because I didn't feel like the story was interesting enough. I could only be like, hey, you want to see a cool, super violent Ninja Turtle comic book? It's crazy. There's blood in it. But, that's pretty much it. I think Kevin Eastman is a great concept guy, and he can tell a story visually like the best of them, but I think he needs some help when it comes to scripting, So luckily, Tom Waltz was brought in to help out. So now you have a mini-series with beautiful art, great writing, and some of the best Ninja Turtle battles you'll ever see in print. And speaking of battles, I love Raph's lone assault on Karai and her foot soldiers. Some of the pages are broken into 2 panels, but it never feels cheap, like, what, he only wanted to draw 2 panels per page? That's, like, you need to shove more in there. Like, no, you don't need to put any more on those pages because, as you're following that storyline, like, you feel every hit that Raph is making on those foot soldiers as he makes his way towards Karai. But enough about Raph. I'll save that for whenever NECA releases his action figure. I love how this story pushes Mikey to the limit, pitting him against ninjas, robots, and ninja robots. We get to see him act as a leader during the assault on Stockman's stronghold. He acts as Casey Marie's teacher for a little bit, which is nice. You feel for him whenever he fails, and you cheer for him whenever he succeeds. Like, Mikey just gets put through the ringer in this miniseries, and he just keeps going until he succeeds with his mission. I love these shots where, like, Mikey is just beaten, he's got blood gushing out his mouth. It looks so brutal, I'm not, like, sadistic or anything like that, but it's just, I don't know, it's nice to see a comic book that wasn't afraid to push the hero as low as he could possibly get. I also really like the idea of him traveling the world for the past 16 years, using Splinter's journal to learn as many fighting techniques as he could. I think all that could make the upcoming prequel a lot of fun. I just hope it doesn't come off as like some kind of cheap cash grab. 2 things before I go. While reading this, I kind of felt like, the demise of the Turtles was all Splinter's fault. Raph not so much. Even though the Foot's attack on Splinter sent him on the rampage that, would kill him. But with Leo and Don, definitely. All right? Like, he seems like he keeps acting foolishly and making bad decisions or something. Like he never should have trusted Hiroto's treaty. I mean, that was a given. And he never should have split the guys up. Taking Donatello to Japan led to Leo's death. Maybe if Donatello was still in New York, he could have come up with some way to stop Baxter's self-destructing mousters. And Don died because Splinter acted, stubbornly and foolishly. He wouldn't retreat, even after Don was begging him to leave the area where they were having the peace treaty. Hiroto ambushed him and was trying to kill them. But and Donatello wanted to leave because he felt that they were outnumbered and the archers would be the death of them. But Splinter became blinded by his rage, and Donatello died trying to protect him. Splinter has always put his personal vendettas on the shoulders of the Turtles. I mean, look at issue number 1, when he sent them to go kill Oroku Saki, to avenge his master, Hamato Yoshi. They had nothing to do with that. That attack on Oroku Saki in issue number 1 led them to their very deaths in this miniseries. And maybe I'm being too hard on Splinter. I don't know. You let me know in the comments if you think I'm being a little rough. I just feel like, I don't know, when I was rereading this, it just seemed like Splinter was making all the wrong decisions. There's one final thing I wanted to point out before getting back to the toy, and that's, if you didn't know that Kevin Eastman was a Frank Miller fan before you read The Last Ronin, you'll definitely know it after you read it, because he slipped in quite a number of nods in here. As I already pointed out, Karai looks, a lot like Elektra with her red outfit and that red cap on her head. Mikey's final battle with Oroku Hiroto seems very similar to Batman's battle with the mutant leader in The Dark Knight Returns, mostly because they're fighting in the mud. When Mikey finally dies, it's very reminiscent of The Dark Knight again, when Batman fakes his own death while he's battling Superman. They even included a flatline on the page. And finally, the last page feels like it has hope and optimism for a far better future, as Casey Marie talks to these 4 new turtles, which are going to be mutated. I think that reminds me of the last page of The Dark Knight Returns, which, I don't know, kind of gives me the same feeling, as Batman is leading his followers to a better tomorrow. All right, that's it. Let's talk about the toy. So let's take a closer look at Mikey as the Last Ronin. First, the face. Now I think NECA, or Paul to be exact, did a wonderful job capturing the likeness from the comic book. I think proportionally, he looks great, and the details are exactly what you're looking for, wrinkles everywhere, right? He's got a lot of wrinkles in his brow, around his mouth, even underneath the chin here. He has a lot of wrinkles, and that's exactly how he looks in the comic book. A lot of sharp black line wrinkles all over. They got to make him look as old as possible, because this is an old Michelangelo. This is 16 years after the other guys got murdered. So what, is he probably around 40? I think they did a really good job with the paint. It's nice. It's pretty clean, and I really like the teeth. He's got so many teeth in there. And I might even like the extra variant head even more, just because it's more expressive. The mouth is open. I like how all the teeth are different shapes and lengths and stuff like that. Like, it's not just completely perfect. That's great. That really gives his face a lot of character. And then if you look at the back of the head here, you can see that he's got spots all over the back of his head, just like he appears in the comic book. Now let's take a look at the armor. And, this is some of the nicest clothing sculpting I've seen, First, I love how all the materials look like different materials. Like, you have leather, you have cloth, you have metal here. Each is sculpted to look unique. The leather looks stiffer than the cloth. The wrinkles are more subtle. And the paint is slightly glossy. Plus, there's like a what do you call it? Like a wash on top of it to kind of make it look dark and worn. The shoulder pads are also supposed to be like a leather material, but they look different than the belt, which is, it's nice, because they look like they're padded here. Like the wrinkles aren't very deep, and I really like the detail along the edges here. Like it's we call it like primped or something like that. If you look at some of the other leather parts of his body, like the gloves, like those look great too. Like the wrinkles look really nice. They look very practical. Like they don't look like they just painted his hand brown, It actually looks like there's a form underneath this material, It's giving that illusion, like it's a realistic glove, which is pretty awesome. And the paint on this too is very nice with the subtle washes and whatnot. The cloth or fabric of his armor looks really nice. I like the texture. I think that's great. It's completely covered in texture, even the hood up here, and the pants. There's some dry brushing on this to really bring out the peaks of the wrinkles, and just I like the way the wrinkles look all in here too, especially around the bicep area here. Like it really gives it kind of like a comic book feel. You know, unlike the leather, the wrinkles of the arms and the coat here are you know, harsher. You know, they're a little heavier than these ones, which are kind of, you know, subtle. Now with the lower legs here, I'm a little unsure what that's supposed to be. Like, is this supposed to be like cloth? Like, are these wrapped up his lower legs, or is this like a hard material that's like more of an armor type? I couldn't tell by this, and I couldn't tell by looking at the book. The knee pad here looks good. You know, it matches the belt. And then this knee pad right here looks, I don't know, it's not like, it's like a rusted metal sort of, or I wouldn't say rusted, it's just a worn metal. And it looks different than the metal of like his gauntlets here, these armbands. Because, you know, this looks like a little more high-tech, nice and clean. And I really love how, like, you have all the scrapes, and then it looks like the scrapes have cut through the paint and gotten down to the actual metal underneath. It creates a nice 3D illusion, which is nice, you know, like as if this is an actual like solid piece of metal. And because these are like kind of clean and mechanical looking, like it creates a nice contrast to the rest of his outfit. Now Mikey does wear sandals, which I think is kind of strange. Like, why would he cover the rest, like his whole body in armor, and then leave his toes completely open? Like, could you imagine if he was fighting Oroku Hiroto, and just about as he was going to move in for the kill, like he stubbed his toe? That'd be awful. They put a wash on his feet here to kind of make them look a little dirty, I guess. And then the bottoms of them, there's just a nice little some texture and some detail work here. I think the hood is designed really well. It has a very nice snug fit. I actually thought that this was all one piece. I think the way that the way the wrinkles are sculpted underneath the chin here look really good. You know, like as if this is actually being pulled underneath his head. And what I think is really great is when you remove the hood, there's actually a peg inside of here. Oh, you see that peg there? That actually plugs into his bandana hole, which is nice because not only does the hood fit snug on his head, but because you have that peg there, it kind of locks it into place. And last here, we should talk about the back here. Now, this weapon ring is cool. You know, I like this. I think it looks neat. It looks like just like it does in the comic book. But I do not trust these hoops at all. This does not feel very malleable. Like it feels like you could definitely rip through this vinyl or plastic. The holes are not that big, you know, and I've been trying to get the bow or the scabbard to go inside of them, and it is just ridiculously hard. Like, I don't know, I'm going to have to try to maybe warm them up a little bit to try to get them in there before the review is over. But at the moment, I've been trying to just slowly wiggle that down there, and like it is such a tight grip. And as I said, I don't trust that. I also kind of don't trust the way that the ropes go into his body. I kind of feel like, you know, it would be very easy to pull this string out of one of these crevices. The only item that he cannot put on his belt for sure, you know, with there's no way, is the tonfa. Like, you are not going to be able to put this in any of these hoops. Which he does wear, you know, if you look at the back of if you look at his back on the cover of issue number 1, he does have the tonfas on his belt there. So I decided to switch out his head, just because I kind of like that head a little more. And luckily, you know, if you wanted to, you can, there's an extra bandana here you can plug into this closed mouth face, which is nice. I actually kind of like the way this bandana drapes over the front of his shoulder. That looks pretty good. But this one has a very, very long bandana, so you can have him like floating, or like if you wanted to have him jumping through the air, you could have the bandana flowing in the breeze. But I'm going to remove that bandana and put the hood on it, and then we're going to check out articulation. All right, so let's take a look at articulation. I'm sorry. All right, so what I did notice was when I put the hood on this head, it's not as flush on the bottom. Like, it doesn't fit as snug as it does the closed mouth head. I think it's just because the mouth is opened up. It kind of has to push it down a little bit, the edges of the hood. All right, so if you're looking up, this is about as high up as you can get. You can look down somewhat. Now, there is a little bit of a gap in the back of the head here, but, I mean, you're not going to really notice it that much because you're probably going to have him, facing forward. Now, there doesn't seem to be any upper torso articulation, but you have a ball joint here in the waist. I mean, you can kind of, but I mean, that's pretty stiff. I mean, he barely can lean from side to side. Does it a little bit. You can rotate it around, but it's kind of obstructed by the belt just a little bit. And you can't, you can lean forward and back a little bit, but not much. The shoulder here rotates around. I will say the joints on this are nice and stiff. They're not too stiff that you're going to break it, but they are stiff enough that you will probably be able to hold whatever pose you want. There's a hinge here. The arm goes up about that high. The elbow joints are double jointed. You have the hinge, and both of them can rotate. I guess I forgot to mention earlier, the elbow pads are pretty nice too. They almost look like two different types of material. Like, this is more of a harder plastic, and the strap here looks more like a leather. And then the wrists rotate, and they have a hinge as well. I'm sure that they probably are still using the same hips that they always use. Yes, which are good because you have rotation on a ball, and you also have an extra slit here for I guess a slit for more rotation, which is good because sometimes you can't get that ball to rotate the way you want it to. The knee joint here is double jointed. And I actually had to get these, I had to work at them a little bit to get the knees to work. Now, you do kind of want him to be a little dexterous because, I mean, he's doing like jump kicks and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's pretty good. The coat here doesn't restrict his movement too much with the leg there. You have two joints down here. You have one at like the bottom of this wrap, and then you have another joint here at the ankle. This one just rotates, and this one has a hinge and ankle rockers. So that's good. So if you couldn't tell, I think NECA's brand new armored Last Ronin action figure is just an amazing sight. He looks great, and he poses pretty well. I was having a little bit of difficulty sometimes trying to balance him on like one foot. It's just like, I don't know, he's got some weight things going on where it's going to be difficult to get him into like kicking poses and stuff like that without some form of assistance. To be honest with you, I had a harder time getting the foot soldiers to stand than this guy, but still, it's like his feet are like kind of big. And it's just kind of a little difficult to, I don't know, even maybe get him into like a running pose. His shoulder joints are hindered a little bit. Like, you can't get him to extend his arms like completely straight out from his body to the side. But you can still mess with it and get it to look right. Like he is, perhaps whacking somebody in the face with his tonfa who's to the side of him. Another thing that was a little tricky posing him for these shots was the goggles. The band of the goggles just isn't very long, and it's kind of hard to stick the head on. Once you get the goggles around his neck, the head will pop off and stuff like that, and it kind of, stops him from looking down a lot, or, I mean, he can't really look up that much either. But you can usually move him around just enough to get something that works. The joints remain nice and tight, so he wasn't falling over or anything like that, which is great, compared to Super 7's Ninja Turtle action figures. I think until NECA releases some bad guys from The Last Ronin, these 1990 movie foot soldiers look perfect next to him, because they don't have realistic human faces, like they got masks. And the texture on their gi or whatever their ninja outfits are matches Mikey's texture. So I think they actually fit really well together. So if you're bored of just having the Last Ronin stand by himself on your shelf, have him knock those guys around a little bit. All right, so now accessories. So Mikey comes with a ton of great accessories, but unfortunately, if you want to have a complete armored Last Ronin action figure, you're going to have to buy the unarmored figure too, and I'll explain why in a little bit. So first, he comes with the Tonfa. This is Mikey's main choice of weapon throughout the series. That makes sense to me because, if somebody killed my family, I'd want to pound the shit out of everybody too. I mean, that's what this kind of feels like. It's like a personal weapon. Like you hold this with your hand and you're just bashing the crap out of people. These are made out of wood and they are reinforced with metal. If you look at Kevin Eastman's concept art, he's got a page titled Breakdown of Mike's Gear Pieces. And here he wrote, he fights a lot with these. And he does. He fights Robo Ninja Cops, foot soldiers, and he even uses them during the attack on Baxter. Now, here's a weird continuity error. In this panel, he's looking at the robot, all set to attack with his Tonfa, and then immediately in the next panel on the next page, he's attacking with a sword and a sai. Did he just drop them and grab these? What happens? There's actually quite a number of inconsistencies throughout the series. If you ever look at his belt in issue 1, the belt buckle changes almost every panel. In issue 5, Mikey uses these to, when he attacks Hiroto's tower. He can crack both of these together to create a localized EMP, which he does in issue number 1, 4, and 5, which is my favorite because he uses them, the EMP, to destroy a bunch of crows, robotic crows. And he can also use them to deflect bullets. Now, you may have noticed, Mikey always uses 2 of these things. 2 to fight, 2 to create a EMP, and NECA only gave you 1, which is a bummer. So you need to get that unarmored action figures in order to make him look complete. The design looks pretty close to the cartoon or the comic book, like the wood inside and then the metal reinforced on the outside. He can hold them pretty well, but it's a little tricky to get in there. Sometimes I kind of have to rotate it around to try to move the fingers out of the way. And if you leave the Tonfa in his hand, the handle is so big, it'll kind of stretch the gripping hand out a little bit. And that can actually make it a little difficult to get him to hold some of the other items, like the nunchucks, or because that grip is stretched out, he has a hard time holding that. But bam, right on some dude's head. Next, you have Donatello's bow. And in issue number 4, Mikey says all that was left of his brother Master Splinter was their ashes, his brother's blood-stained bow, and Splinter's journal. This looks pretty great. The only time I remember him using this in the storyline was whenever he cracked Oroku Hiroto in the head and broke it in half. That's the only time I think he actually uses the bow in the series. He's a very loyal brother, though. I mean, he carries this thing around with him all the time, even if he isn't using it. I mean, could you imagine? It's huge and awkward. Damn it, Don, couldn't you fight with a Swiss Army knife? Why I gotta carry this giant stick around? Mikey can hold the bow just fine, but, it's a little tricky getting it in there. I actually had to remove both hands, put them on the bow, and then put them back into his body. A lot of it has to deal with the way the hinge is angled. It's a horizontal hinge instead of a vertical hinge. So, it's a little tricky, but, he's still holding it just fine. In the beginning of this review, I said that I had a really hard time getting the items in here. I did warm these up, and the sheath was able to slide in there nice and easy. And the bow, I was able to warm that up and get that in there too. And now since I did that, the hole's been stretched out a little bit, so it's easier to put this in and out. So there you go. But I mean, it looks all right. It juts out a little bit from his body, but it still looks pretty flat. So that's good, you know. You don't want it like completely sticking out like this. The way it lays on the body works out just fine. Next, you have Raphael's Sai. This looks nice. The shiny paint looks good. And, you know, I was kind of wondering about this, you know. Like, I was wondering if the turtles recovered Raph's body from the bottom of the river or bay or whatever it is, and if they also recovered one of his Sais. Or is this an extra Sai? You know, it kind of looked like Mikey got this from the lair before he traveled to Japan to warn Splinter of Dawn and Hiroto's treachery. Eventually in the story, he stabs this into Hiroto's hand. This fits easily in his hand, especially if you stretched it out with the tonfa. Bam. And you can also put it on the belt. It's the easiest weapon to put on the belt. There you go. Up next, you have Leonardo's sword and scabbard. The details on this are really nice, especially the handle. I like how you have like these dark diamonds in the middle. And even the gold is painted nice, and the silver, it's all nice and metallic looking. The paint, there is no paint on the scabbard. It's just a simple brown color. As you can see here, it, you know, fits on there. Okay, I got it to get in. That's all I need. And it'll stay there forever. Unless that vinyl rips. All right, there's only one thing about the sword, right? This long sword. And I don't think this is NECA's fault. I actually think that this is a comic book error, all right? So, you know, in the storyline, Mikey's running around with Donatello's bow, one of Raphael's Sais, and Leonardo's broken sword. He lays them all out when he commits, when he's about to commit seppuku, and he uses the broken sword later on in the series. Whenever he's attacking Stockman's fortress or whatever, you know, he uses it to slice apart a robot and cut apart some turrets. So in my opinion, he probably is supposed to always only have a broken sword. But in issue 1, and this is where I think this is a comic book error because there are some other errors, continuity errors here. He uses a unbroken sword to fight these robots. This is the only time he uses a unbroken sword, right? Even when he tries to commit suicide, he never has this unbroken sword. So in my opinion, you know, that was a mistake, and, you know, NECA probably just saw that in the comic and was like, all right, we're going to give him the full unbroken sword. So like I said, I don't put this on NECA. I also don't believe this is a sword he just recently picked up or an extra sword that he picked up at the turtle lair before traveling to Japan. I just think that this is Leonardo's sword, the only thing that was really left of Leonardo after he exploded. So unfortunately, if you want your armored Michelangelo to have a broken sword, you're going to have to buy the unarmored Last Ronin action figure. Bummer. Eventually, in the final battle, Mikey stabs this broken sword into Hiroto's side. Mikey can hold the katana extremely well, you know, even with the hand that's stretched out. It's probably even easier to get it into that hand. I really like the final battle a lot, you know, especially how Mikey uses every one of his brother's weapons to strike a blow. It's like they're all getting their final shot at Hiroto. And what I really like is at the end, Mikey finally pulls out his nunchucks, and, you know, it's like Mikey can finally be himself as he's fighting Hiroto. You know, he let Hiroto have his brother's revenge, and now he's just attacking him as himself. Now, these nunchucks look pretty good. I like these a lot. I like the details on the side here, like this little grip. You got a real metallic chain, which is always nice. Now, in the series, his nunchucks actually changed a little bit. Like, these ones don't have the metal down at the bottom. You don't see the metal down at the bottom in issue 1, but there are some times when they're drawn with the little metal down at the bottom. So, again, continuity error. Mikey can hold the nunchucks just fine, but as I said before, if you put the tonfa in his hand and leave it there, it's going to stretch his grip out a little bit. Like, look, this one has never had the tonfa in it, and it's tight. This one has had the tonfa, and it slides all around. Like, you can't put his hand up, or else it'll just slide right down. You know, I thought it was great that Mikey carried all of his brothers with him throughout the series, but I did wonder a little bit about the eye bandanas, right? When did he get these? You know, he may have had rafts if they fished his body out of the water, you know, and maybe he took that from the lair. But when Leonardo blew up, there was nothing left of him except for the sword. So when did he get the eye band? You know, as I said, maybe he got an extra Raph and Leo bandana from the lair before he left for Japan. But then it also asks the question, where did he get Don's? You know, he said all that was left of him was his ashes and his bow. That was it. And we all know that, you know, he hasn't been to the lair to grab them in the past 16 years because this is his first time returning to New York. And April's been living in the lair this whole time, so he never went home to get them. Next up, you have Mikey's goggles. And now, this may surprise you, but Mikey never uses these. He never wears them throughout the series. The only time you could possibly think that he might be wearing goggles is whenever he's talking about traveling the world or walking in Japan to find like a place to find peace or whatever. You would have thought maybe he would have used these during the attack on Stockman's lair or fortress or whatever, but no, he never wears them. He always just has them draped around his neck here. Now, if you do want to put these goggles on his head, it can actually be a little tricky. Because his head is so smooth and round, the band here just keeps on flipping up. You know, it's probably better to put the goggles on and then try to put the hood on so that the peg keeps the goggles in place. It's a little difficult, actually. It can be done, but it is tricky. It is tricky trying to move that hood around the band. I also kind of wondered if Mikey only wears these as a tribute to his brother Donatello, who is shown sometimes to be wearing goggles as a ghost. Next, Michelangelo comes with 4 shurikens. These are great, you know, they are nice and sharp, they all look the same. Sculpting is good, nice and clean. He can hold this with his, look at that, even with the stretched out hand, he's still able to hold that ninja star. That's great. In the series, in the story, he uses one of these shurikens to take out a camera in issue number 1. There's also a smoke bomb, which is great. The detail on this thing is really nice. It's this little tiny object, but it has all these nice shapes, and he's got the nice red little dot there in the middle, so he could turn it on. It's a little difficult getting him to hold this, but there you go. He's ready to toss that thing. Mikey uses this in issue 1 to create a diversion. It also kind of looks a little bit like the flashbang in issue 5, which Mikey uses to confuse this giant sentry. I love this guy, by the way. Like, NECA, if you want to make any bad guys from this series, make this giant sentry-looking guy. He is cool. And the final weapon to be discussed here is Mikey's grappling hook. I guess it's not really a weapon, but whatever. This is great. You have a real string, and the string is probably like 18 inches long. It is very, very long. You know, these things, you always have to do what you can to like wrap it around his hands and then wrap it around the other one, kind of make it look as though he's holding this thing, but it is very nice. I don't think this is going to support this guy if you hang it up and try to have him hold on to it, but if you mess around with this thing, you actually can get this to support him and make it look as though he is climbing up a tower. And in this story, he uses the grappling hook to scale the wall outside of New York. You see, in the future, the water levels have risen, and they had to build a wall around New York to protect everybody from drowning. And the only thing left to discuss are the hands. Mikey has a set of gripping hands. He's got a set of fists. The mass and shape of these all look great and practical. You know, it doesn't look like they are weird. And you have like these reaching hands or expressive hands. Again, the wrinkles and everything, even the seams going down the sides of the fingers, all look great. You know, all this stuff is just wonderful. One final thing before wrapping up this video, I just wanted to show Mikey as the Last Ronin next to a few of the other Michelangelo action figures. Mikey's come a long way since 1984, and you know, it'll be exciting to see where he goes in the next 38 years. Nah, who's kidding? I'll be dead by then. And that's it. You know, this is a really wonderful action figure. I think that Paul Harding did an amazing job of sculpting this guy, and I cannot wait to get the other Ninja Turtles in this series, you know. From what I understand, every turtle is its own unique sculpt, so I just can't wait to I do think the next figure that is released needs to be a bad guy, though. I mean, you need somebody for Mikey to fight, you know, right? And then, you know, get the turtles out. So, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think, and have a good one.